The last 10 years, food production has been affected by continuous conflicts between herders and farmers in the Middle Belt. Terrorist attacks on farmers in the northeast and bandit attacks in the northwest have led to reduced agricultural activities as many flee their farms for safety. Food prices in Nigeria have continued to surge in the last 1 year, with the data from the National Bureau of Statistics showing that the composite food index rose by 22.72% in April 2021 from 15.03% in April 2020. As the composite food index rose to 22.28% in May 2021 compared with 22.72% in April 2021, food still remains expensive and unaffordable by the majority of the Nigerian population, well, pushing an estimated 7 million Nigerians below the poverty line. Well, as the conflicts between the crop growers and northern cattle herders seeking grazing pasture in the south continue, economic experts are of the view that the surging hike in the price of food price is far from abating. With the rising food prices amid the drop in inflation, the big question now is what will be the impact, of course, on the standard of living of Nigerians. I introduced him. He's joining us live from the United Kingdom. He's a research and agribusiness economist, Dr. Matthew Ojo. Dr. Ojo, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Todu, and thanks for having me.
Yes, Dr. Ojo, let's start with our agricultural space in its entirety. What we had before now. We had a lot of stories of the pyramids and all of the beautiful things that were happening with groundnuts, with cocoa, and all of that before now. But at the moment, the reverse seems to be the case. Take us through what played out and how did we get to this point?
Thank you very much, Todu. To start with, you see, the story of agriculture in Nigeria is a sad one. And you asked me, why did I say that? If you understand how this country started, just when we got our independence, and what was the sole source of our revenue immediately after independence, we're talking about the 60s and the 70s, you understand that it was through agriculture. You will look at the different regions, especially the southwest, the western region. Look at the development infrastructures that we have there, the roads, the schools, and all the lights, even the buildings like a Cocoa House. They all came from proceeds of agriculture. And so you have a country that started on agriculture. It's not as if we're expected to remain on that primitive level of production, but we have not been able to build on that over the years. And then you find that what we're having now is a result of that neglect or systemic decay in the agricultural sector. And then you have a country that has up to 34 million hectares of arable land. When you talk about arable land, you are talking about land that you have put into cultivation for crops, pastures, and maybe meadows, and then you have that kind of huge expanse of land that is arable. And you can only find very few countries that are more than us in terms of that quantum or that size of land. Maybe just about 8 countries. You talk about maybe India, Argentina, Brazil, Canada, US, and the likes. But then you also have that, and we are not able to feed ourselves. We are not able to produce enough to take care of our citizens. So you have an agricultural sector that employs, or maybe like up to 70% of households are involved in agriculture. We can't feed ourselves. We also have countries that only about 5% of the population, of the citizen, feeds the entire nation. So what is the challenge? The challenge is that we have not been able to move beyond where we were, where agriculture is still over 70% rain-fed dependent. We depend on rain. So you talk about seasonality. Now, this expanse of land we are talking about, I was reading a report from the International Food Policy and Research Institute, IFPRI, I think in 2018, that was talking about only 1% of irrigation land in the country. So an average farmer still goes to produce and then prays and hopes that rain falls. Let me give you a story. I was involved with coordinating about 50 farmer groups in 50 villages some few years ago. I had a farmer who planted 4 acres of tomatoes, and they were already fruiting. We were praying for rain, practically praying for rain. Unfortunately, rain didn't come. The man lost the entire 4 acres. When I say 4 acres, I'm talking about 1.5 hectares of tomatoes. So you see, these problems are always there. And if if you look at the sector itself, you want to rank agriculture in terms of contribution to GDP, it's just about 21-22%, okay, over time. And if you look at the report I was studying, 2018 report that was ranking African countries, 48 of them, Nigeria ranks 20th. So we are below countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, Mali, okay, even Liberia in terms of agricultural contribution to the GDP. Now, these are things that have over time, okay, affected the agricultural sector. So if you want me to talk about the budget, what is the budgetary allocation to agriculture in the past 10 years? Okay, in the past 10 years, we have not had a budgetary allocation that is more than 2%. In 2020, okay, it was 1%. And 2021, I think about 1.3% of the entire budget. And this is a government that is talking about, okay, diversification. So at times when you hear all these things, you begin to wonder, is it just for the interest of people to hear the news? But when you go down to the field, what you see is different. 1%, 2% of your budget to agriculture, and then the Maputo Declaration that was signed in 2003, that's about 18 years ago, recommended that African heads of states, allocate up to 10% of their budgetary allocation to agriculture. But we are not having that. So the situation is you were talking about insecurity. Look, insecurity just came recently. The agricultural sector has been in serious trouble before insecurity came and added its own. So you can see all these things I've laid out. When government talks about agriculture, my concern is this: it seems as if state governments just go to sleep. No, there's nothing that says that agriculture is in the exclusive list, for God's sake. So you look at the whole setting, you begin to wonder: is it only the federal government that should address agricultural issue? But then you know that there are three basic needs of man. Okay, food is one of them. The other two, shelter and clothing. If food is not addressed, a nation that cannot address food issues will continually have what we are having now, presently.
It's a real good way to start this conversation, Dr. Joe. I must appreciate that. But now let's look at the reality on ground in Nigeria. Yeah, like you said, insecurity and all of the headers issues just popped up. So even before now, there were some contending issues on ground. Now, food inflation dropped slightly to 22.28% from 22.72%. For Nigerians, they are not really interested in these figures. They are talking about purchasing power continues to dwindle while the price of food and all agricultural produce remains on the high side. How do we comprehend? How do we put this side by side?
Thank you very much. You see, when you talk about inflation, you are looking at average change in prices, over time, especially when you're considering a basket of commodities or services. So when you look at the food inflation, you said it dipped year on year. Remember that last year's figure, we had issues with lockdown restrictions, coronavirus. So that is not even a benchmark. Now, let me tell you this, okay? In the past 5 years, Nigeria food inflation has risen by 110.5% between 2015 and 2020. So you see the gradual increase in food inflation. And when you are talking about inflation, okay, you break it down. You are looking at the headline inflation is what we always talk about. But you have headline inflation made up of the core inflation and then the food inflation. You see, inflation in Nigeria has consistently been driven up by food inflation. And one would expect that a country that wants to address, rising cost of living will pay attention to what are the factors that are driving food inflation. Now, this food inflation we're talking about, or the high cost of food, we're not talking about food that are imported. We're talking about food that we grow in the country. Is it cassava? Is it gari? Is it yam? Is it cowpeas? All the different type of varieties. Now, these are grown in the country, and you have their prices rising astronomically. If it is not the issue of seasonality, it's going to be the issue of high cost of transportation. If it is not that, it's going to be the issue of post-harvest losses. If it is not that, you are going to look at improper value chain development. All these issues are the same problem that we've been hearing about since we were in secondary school. Tolu, if you ask a university graduate now, what are the problems of agricultural sector in Nigeria, he or she is most likely to tell you the same thing I was taught when I was still in secondary school. Sure. So the question is, we've had successive governments talking about addressing the agricultural sector, but we are not still able to make headway. What I have discovered working with farmers, okay, in the rural areas is this. We have federal government wanting to change certain things. We have state governments, I'm not saying all of them, most of them who are disconnected from this vision. And the man in the field is still using, I've said it before, go to an average farm, whether in Oyo or in Oshun, what kind of implements are they using, for God's sake? Cutlass and hoe in this century. And you are talking about diversification, you are talking about improving food production in the country. Oftentimes when you hear about increase in food production, go and check it very well. Usually is as a result of increase in area of land cultivated, not in productivity. Okay? Or in developing world, somebody can use small space to produce something that will astound you. But we keep on increasing the space of land where we cultivate, and we are rejoicing that our production is increasing. So I think there's a problem we need to address here. Nigeria is the second largest producer of sorghum, I think, after US. Nigeria leads in the production of cassava worldwide. What is wrong in us not being able to address that, our agricultural sector? Let me shock you, Tolu. The Federal Minister of Agriculture has about up to 16 or 17 research institutes that are focused on agriculture in Nigeria. Now, you are not funding those research institutes, but you have money to fund salaries. So the question is, why do you keep on pumping monies to pay salaries and you're not ready to fund those research institutes to come out with outcomes that can improve food production in the country? It beats my imagination. The way the country is being run, you wonder if we really are concerned about improving food production in the country.
Now, the central bank has maintained this position that's supporting agriculture. We see it from their reports and all that is out there, cotton farming, for the even for milk production, all sectors. You can just go on and on. Lately, moving production for wheat and all of that. That agricultural space, the central bank is trying to play actively there. Anchors borrower scheme, rice farming, and all of this. What is your assessment in all of this efforts by the Apex Bank? Is it really yielding fruits?
Well, let's say the truth. The central bank is not the Minister of Agriculture, and the central bank can only do so much. Now, if you notice very well, the areas where central bank is intervening are the areas that will put less pressure on our naira, on our currency, because of importation. So the central bank is only looking at, okay, what are those food commodities that people come to ask for foreign exchange for, and that is pulling down our naira. So they are focusing on, for example, rice. So we don't have to spend so much on rice. They are focusing on maybe wheat, so that we don't have to spend so much importing wheat. They are focusing on milk, like you saw the other time. So these are just selected commodities that the central bank think that, okay, let's see if we can build our capacity in these areas, so that we will have less pressure on the naira for people demanding exchange rate to to import these commodities. So you need to understand that very well. However, you also mentioned the uncle's borrower scheme, which is working. But you see, let me also say this. I took out time, okay, to study what was going on in the Southwest. At least I went to 2 central banks offices, and we came to the Department of Development Finance to find out how these things are going on in terms of anchor borrower scheme. Honestly, the story and the revelation that came out, even from our farmers, was not a good one. Let me just stop at that. It's working elsewhere, I want to believe so, and we are seeing the result as they are showing us on the TV. But what percentage of this? Okay, now let me make you understand this. We produce, at times, it's not just a production issue, it's also the losses. For 2020 alone, okay, a report that I was reading, okay, I think by the IMF, was saying that post-harvest losses amounted to about $9 billion. Not even IMF, it was the Federal Minister of Agriculture that was giving these figures. This figure rather, $9 billion losses, post-harvest losses. And then look at how much we spend on food in Nigeria. Household income, about 56% of it goes to food. So you see the reason why what CBN is doing is commendable. But like I said earlier, CBN can only do so much. They focus on those commodities that we are spending so much to import. But what about the one people consume here that are not going outside? What are we doing to reduce these losses? What are we also doing to ensure that we reduce the percentage of income that goes to food? Outside Nigeria, in the developed world, food is amongst the cheapest thing you spend your income on, for God's sake. So you see households are struggling to have something to eat. The woman on the street that is hawking sachet water, what we call pure water, is looking for money so that she can buy food for her kids. And a large chunk of that money goes to food purchasing. So you need to address that. Nigeria ranks amongst the highest countries. Okay, about a report by World Economic Forum for 2019 was showing that only 4 countries in the entire Africa have spent over 40% of household income on food. Nigeria leads that pack. So we need to start looking at how do we ensure that food prices don't change as it is changing now. The rate at which it's changing is just too astronomical. It's affecting income, like you mentioned. It's affecting household. And whether you like it or not, if we are able to address the food problem of our country, half of the current situations going on in Nigeria will be resolved. Because when the man eats, he's less angry. The anger you see people expressing on the street is because people are hungry. And the government doesn't seem to, in fact, I don't know if we have, I know we have a Minister of Agriculture, but honestly speaking, it's like we don't have. I'm not blaming him. Maybe that's how it's been over the years, with the exception of few. But the ministry has to be up and doing. Not only the federal ministry, so that we don't absorb the state. How many states Ministry of Agriculture are doing so much to ensure that their state is food sufficient? Tolu, you can carry out an independent investigation. Go to the Ministry of Agriculture in states, selected states, and see what is happening there, for God's sake. I know of a governor, in the southwest, who bought for all his local government, bought tractors, set of tractors, I think about 10 or so per local government, if I'm right. After 1 or 2 years, you could hardly find one tractor in those local governments. We had to take our farmers wanted tractor to plow their farms. We could not get. They said they have even sold some of those tractors to private owners. They should go and lend it from those private owners. For God's sake, a nation that is serious about agriculture will not do this. So you see that the issue of insecurity just came on what was already, but it just came to make a bad situation worse. There was problem already that we needed to address, and the central bank can only do so much.
All right, Dr. Ojo, I think we're going to have a session on what needs to be done and how we can address all of these challenges focused on that. I must thank you. This is much as I can take on the show, research and agribusiness economist, Dr. Matthew Ojo. Thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us on Business Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
All right, great there.